I don't know if it's an African poltergeist, but or a New Yorker poltergeist. Maybe it could be both.
Sounds like a New Yorker.
It could be a New Yorker poltergeist. I'm delighted to invite Kate Campana, the Chief Executive of the Access Challenge, to welcome you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the second annual 1x1 Target 2030 UNGA conference. As we did last year, and as we...
Oh, the microphone isn't there. Is it on?
It's on, but hold it close.
Very closer, yeah. It's called mic technique, Kate. So.
Oh, darling.
Just like the rappers, just right on the chin. If you watch Method Man, just right there.
Can you hear it now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Just as we did last year, and as we hope to continue to do for the next 11 years, we hope to gather at UNGA the first Monday of the presidential week in order to focus everyone's attention on the progress that we're all making towards UHC. Some very ambitious targets have been set by our illustrious leader, Director General Tedros, and signed on by every country in the world. And as you know, there's a very big high-level meeting on UHC happening as we speak, or it might be finishing very soon, across town. And so the time is ripe to really dig down in the particularities. Today's conference is a little bit different than last year's, and that's a reflection of the fact that on this day, there is the high-level meeting on climate change at the same time as a high-level meeting on UHC. And obviously, the problems that we're facing as a world community are not separable into silos, and the progress that we make on the climate change side is going to very much impact what we're able to do on the health side and vice versa. And so in the conference today, we've tried to, first in this plenary session, discuss all the various aspects of government and financing that need to come together in order to achieve UHC. And then in the 4 panels, or 5 panels upstairs, which are named after the declining resources that we face as a world community: water, air, food, communities, and finance. We are going to focus attention on the intersectionality between health issues and the fight for clean resources across the globe. So we're excited because we're seeing new partnerships develop between folks who normally didn't talk to each other, folks in the water world talking to the health world, sanitation world talking likewise to the health world, the air world talking to the pneumonia people, et cetera. And that kind of cooperation is going to mean that we do more with less, and that means we can maybe achieve the universality that we seek. So we are very excited to welcome all of you, and I hope you enjoy the afternoon.
Kate, thank you very much. Thank you. Thankfully, I don't need one of these because I have what we call a lapel mic, a roving mic. Okay, we're going to get straight into it. Because did that roll? My bad, my bad, my bad. Where was that poltergeist? Come back. 1 second. Let me do it that way. Voila. Right. We have a panel. Our high-level plenary. Some of these names will be familiar to you. 1 or 2 may be un peu inconnus. Maybe you don't know these guys. But they are distinguished, and they have a lot to say. First of all, let me welcome Her Excellency, Dr. Jane Acheng, Minister of Health from Uganda. Dr. Jane Acheng. Where is she? She's not here. I thought I saw her a moment ago. Maybe she doesn't look too much like a wiki picture. Okay. His Excellency, Michel Sidibé, Minister of Health and Social Affairs from Mali. Mr. Sidibé. How are you? Fantastic. You go this way, yeah? We have Her Excellency Yvonne Aki Sawyer, Mayor of Freetown, Sierra Leone. And there are some steps here. Don't be so cold. Keep clapping until she gets on stage, please. You left her cold. That was cold. His Excellency Aurélien Simplice Zingas, Chair of the Pan-African Parliament Health Committee. Aurélien. Voilà. Il faut monter là. Oh, non, flexible. So you're going to sit there because you have a translator there, yes? Okay. Yeah. D'accord. And we have Monique Vleder, Head of Secretariat at the Global Financing Facility for Women, Children and Adolescents. Voila. You come here. And we also have Carmen Villar, Vice President, Social Business Network, Innovation, Merck and Company. Hello. Have I left anybody out? Looking at the organizers? Nope, I don't think I have. Maybe you could come a bit closer so that we're not too, yes. So we've got a degree of balance. Thank you very much. Okay. So we want to talk beyond the Ministry of Health, collaboration for UHC. Why do we say beyond the Ministry of Health? It's because people tend to load so much of this agenda on that poor health minister and his or her civil servants. They may be under-resourced, they may not have much capacity even within government, they may not have a great relationship with the Ministry of Finance and some of the other ministries. So that's why we're talking about beyond health, the Ministry of Health. So I want to start off with His Excellency Michel Sidibé. Now, you smile. Yes. No, I mean, yes, of course I have to be provocative. Talk to me a little bit about what's going on in Mali. You've come in from a very, very huge post as a director of, the executive director of UNAIDS, yet you've come into a country, your own country, that is struggling from a high disease burden and is under-resourced. Talk to me a little bit about this agenda and what your focus is, because I understand that you have managed to eliminate user fees. Explain a little bit about that.
Oh, let me just start by saying thanks to Access Initiative to bring us here today, because it's very important. You will never make universal access a reality without bringing people discussing and making sure that we can really go beyond rhetoric. And I'm happy to see also African Union with us, and my sister is here. You know, the reality is so complex in my country, particularly when you have been working in UN for almost 35 years, and at all levels, and you reach this level you were just talking about as Under-Secretary General of United Nations. Coming back home, you know, is a challenge. But is certainly for me one of the most beautiful challenge I can say.
Beautiful challenge.
Yes, I had during these last few years. I'm first falling in love again with my country, and I am discovering that nothing is better than being able to come back and trying to serve your own people. And I want to say, particularly when you're in situation of conflict, when you have insecurity every single places, when you're seeing broken families, when you're seeing society not knowing exactly how to deal with these issues, and you're in situation where the arbitrage is so complex because most of the Minister of Finance will take money and put on security, and they will not put on health. So I think when you're in this situation, you need to really be able to demonstrate to those political leaders.
So when you arrived in May, I think having left the UN, May this year, and you stepped into the Ministry of Health, and you looked at the condition it was in and the level of respect or not it had among other government ministers, what did you say to yourself? Did you say to yourself, right, this needs complete and total reform, and this is number one for me? What was number one?
No, the number one was back to the basic, go to population, trying to really make sure that you better understand why we are not having access to people, why people will say that universal health coverage cannot work in this type of situation, because they will just remain in the highest levels. Going back to communities and trying to understand that primary health care will be the engine for the transformation, demonstrating to our leaders that it is not just about talking addressing disease. It's about health, like you said. When you talk about health, you're talking about certainly creating space for peace. Then convincing them that health become a vector for peace building, because you're winning the heart and the mind of people. And when you have this situation, when you have a barbaric, I can say, the jihadist out there trying to really take those people out of you because you're not present. If you're present with health care, you're present with something which can help them reconcile their option with what you're proposing, you're also contributing to peace building. And for me, that is one of the major, I think, aspect I introduced, but in the debate. But more than that one is to say, let us go back to basic. Let us now build a resilient healthcare system, which will not be just build on tertiary system because our primary healthcare is not working, because most of the people are running from there to go to hospital, which is very expensive, and government can afford it.
Right,
so
okay.
that is the transformation.
I think it's an interesting point at which to start, to see health almost as a vector for so many other things, including security, which is a very interesting way of putting it. I'm going to go to your right and to Her Excellency Yvonne Aki-Sawyer, Mayor of Freetown, Sierra Leone. There's a lot of debate on Twitter this week about whether or not you were the first female. Yes, you're aware of this. She was in the eye of a Twitter storm. Some people were saying, this Yvonne Aki-Sawyer needs to come out and say she's not the first, she's the third. But you are the first elected. The previous two were appointed. So let's hear it for Yvonne Aki-Sawyer. Elected, not selected. She was elected. You see? You like that, don't you? You like that?
Henry, I didn't know you were following me on Twitter.
I follow the buzz around you. But just to kind of think about where we are here, because Mali has gone through some insecurity, but Sierra Leone has too. You had that terrible civil war, then you had the Ebola outbreak, and a healthcare system that was totally decimated. So how on earth do you begin to start putting together any system, let alone one that pretends to offer a sort of universal coverage? How do you even start?
Thank you. I think it's really important, speaking from a city perspective, to slightly reframe your question, bearing in mind that I'm not speaking for the nation.
Yes.
I am not building the healthcare system, but I am contributing at the city level, and as other cities and other local governments can do, in reaching the people where they're at. And it was interesting to hear Minister of Mali talk about communities, and I smiled as he spoke, because what he didn't say was anything about local governments. It sounded again as the ministries, the national players, acting. I'm probably getting this completely wrong in Mali's case, but you know, what we see often is acting as if from that national level they can come straight down to the people at the local level. So two things I'd say in response to your question. You started off mentioning the Ebola outbreak and the war, and as you know, I got involved in the public space. I've only been this elected mayor for 1 year and 4 months. I got involved in the public space because of the Ebola outbreak. I stepped forward, ended up being involved in the response, and the rest is history, as they say. But if there was one thing that I learned, one thing that became really, really clear through the response to that crisis was the importance of community, and the fact that that conversation has to happen with the community. When I stepped forward, got involved in November of 2014, just as the cases were at their peak, the language that was being used at the time in the response was social mobilization. And it took us a few weeks for us to change that to community engagement and then to community ownership. And as we talk about universal health care, I think that's one of the core messages, a recognition that certainly at the central government level, when we talk about having the finances for the infrastructure, these are all really critical elements. But there's another element that's also very important, and that's the ownership by communities. And that's a role, that's a place where cities can actually, not just cities of course, because rural areas as well, where local authorities who are close to residents can play a significant role. I'm sure as the time goes on, perhaps I'll have an opportunity to say a little bit about what we're doing in Transform Freetown from a health perspective, but I'll just stop now.
No, okay, I'm going to do a little supplementary. So you've got the Ministry of Health, you've got all the other ministries in the cabinet, and then you've got a tier of government, one down, essentially.
Subnational.
Subnational, okay. Metropolitan.
Subnational.
Okay, okay. With aspirations, yes. You can see she's a newly elected politician. You can see, can't you? Okay. But so imagine if you're going around Freetown, I don't know what the main high street in Freetown is. It Mano High Street, is it?
Shaka Stevens Street.
Shaka Stevens, of course, Shaka Stevens High Street. And then you see people there who clearly are, going through some sufferation, may not be very well in terms of health. You talk to them about their health needs, and you think, wow. And it would appear that government is absent, as in national government is absent. What do you then do? How do you feed that up the chain to your Ministry of Health colleague, or do you not even go to them? Do you go to the finance colleague? How do you use your metropolitan muscle and make it effective with the Ministry of Health or the other important ministries when it comes to those people, Shaka Stevens people's health?
Okay, so I guess the important thing in the way one responds to these situations is to have a system, because there will every day be somebody that you will see. So how do you approach this systemically? And what we did was to develop a program, our agenda, if you will, for a 4-year transformation of our city. I have a 4-year term called Transform Freetown. It has 4 clusters, 11 priority sectors. The 4 clusters: resilience, human development, healthy city, and the 4th is urban mobility. Within healthy city, we have health, water, and sanitation. Now, each of our sectors has targets. Health has 2 targets, and this is the important bit. We cannot, any one of us, whether at the national level, the local level, the NGOs, the civil society, nobody can work alone. We all have to come together in order for us to be effective in delivering this universal health coverage that our people so seriously and desperately need. So within Transform Freetown, the targets we set were set by having all the players in the room at the City Council. We brought the ministry, we brought the WHO, the other players, and we brought community representatives, and together identified the 2 biggest issues. So our 2 targets for health, for Freetown, one is maternal mortality. As not surprising, I think most people know that the figures for Sierra Leone are one of the worst in the world, if not the worst, and Freetown accounts for 30% of those deaths. So we have a target for maternal mortality of 40% reduction. And we also have a target for NCDs, 5 NCDs: reproductive health, reproductive cancers, diabetes, hypertension, mental health, and substance abuse. There's a reason why we split substance abuse from mental health. So when I see those people, the first thing I do is recognize that we can't fix all the problems, and for immediate actions, no, well, depending on what it is, you can't really call the health minister, you know that.
Yes, yes.
But that doesn't mean the health minister is not engaged, doesn't mean the health minister is not involved. But what you try to do is really push forward on meeting those targets, which are done through a number of initiatives. And then, on a case-by-case basis, there'll always be things that you can't solve. But what you want to be doing is putting systems in place that will actually deal with things on a, on a sort of broader level so that you have greater impact. So I think that would be it. Systems and processes.
Let's leave that word systems hanging pregnantly in the air as we move to Monique Vleda, who is the head of the Secretariat at the Global Financing Facility for Women. You smile the way I introduce you. Global Financing Facility for Women, Children and Adolescents. Are you thinking about this question hanging pregnantly there? I'm just wondering then how the GFF sees this particular discussion beyond the Ministry of Health collaboration for UHC. Because when you hear systems, you think good because we can measure it, we can track it if there's a system. But give us your starting point.
And thank you very much for the opportunity. This is such an important day and such a great step forward with the UHC declaration. And listening to the distinguished guests from Sierra Leone and Mali, it's just, I was thinking back to the moment that the GFF was conceived, and former President Kikwete from Tanzania was very much at the birth of it, and really with the thought behind it that every country context is different, and we need something that finances for this important agenda that really recognizes that and puts the country itself in the leadership position. And so that's the background. I'll talk a little bit more about how we go about doing that. And so we really support governments to take the lead, and on national level to look at what are, in terms of women, children's health, what are our main priorities? How can we make sure that we make a difference, that we include those that are marginalized and that are left behind, and that we collectively rally behind that agenda. And so that's translated into a prioritized investment plan where which we help integrate in a domestic budget, and then make sure that in an efficient way partners can rally around that and align their financing. And I'll give an example from the DRC, where the Minister of Health said the GFF provided me with a GPS to look at what are the community and frontline services that are needed at scale, and how can I make sure that I can make a large investment that is results oriented to decrease the funding that people have to pay out of pocket to access the services, and then to make sure that services are provided to women and children with quality, because that's really at the core of UHC. If we can't take care of the health needs of women and children, how can we reach UHC? Yeah. And then maybe one more point, because I know you're going to cut me off soon. I think it's really instrumental that we all realize that there's not one organization that can do this by themselves, right? And so it's just been so inspiring to see not just ministries of health and finance, but also the nutrition agenda, the wash and water and sanitation, the civil society, the private sector, and in-country bilateral donors, Gavi Global Fund, such important partners for this agenda to really come together and rally behind this prioritized country plan.
Thank you, Monique. Just one quick follow-up. One of the things we want to try and kind of flesh out in this discussion is when we say universal health coverage in the African context, what exactly do we mean? Because here we are in the richest country in the world, and they're nowhere near universal health coverage. And in fact, it's going to be a big topic again in the 2020 election: single payer system, access versus genuine affordability. When it comes to countries that are really struggling to focus on, say, 3 big diseases, how do we frame this notion of universal health coverage? What do you think of when you are discussing universal health coverage in the African context, bearing in mind the variety and the diversity of the continent?
I mean, to me, it's really UHC through primary health care. Okay. And the primary health care is the integrator. Through that, we can fund for immunization, we can fund for sexual reproductive health and rights, we can fund for TB, etc. If that platform that really is in the front line and reaches those that are most in need doesn't function, we have a really big problem. And
very good. Thank you very much, Monique. Let's move to our far left. We have His Excellency Aurélien Samplis-Zingas, who is the chair of the Pan-African Parliament Health Committee. Vous êtes bonjour et bienvenue. Bonjour. So, il va parler en français et va traduire. You're going to speak. Yeah, okay. No, you're en même temps, en même temps. Simultané. Yeah, to beat. Okay, so, Excellency Zingas. Monique mentioned a moment ago immunization. Now, if we consider the African Declaration on Immunization and the impact that's had, how do we get the same impact with this drive for universal health coverage? How are you taking the message of universal health coverage forward in the Pan-African Parliament Health Committee?
Je voudrais d'abord vous remercier. Je voudrais d'abord remercier Access Challenge et les organisateurs de cette réunion pour m'avoir accepté que je prenne part à cette rencontre de haut niveau sur la couverture santé universelle. Maintenant, revenons.
First, I'd like to thank Access Challenge and everyone present and all the honorary members. Is my microphone on? Can you hear me?
It is.
Is it okay now?
But when you
Yeah,
when you move it around,
yeah,
it goes
sorry.
off.
I get very into
Yes.
expressing myself. Sorry.
Yes.
Thanking everyone and giving me the opportunity to be here and talk about this very important subject of universal health coverage.
Revenons à la question qui concerne la déclaration sur l'immunisation. Je pense, à mon avis, que c'est une question de volonté politique au niveau de nos chefs d'État en Afrique. Nos chefs d'État,
Coming back to this very important question of universal health coverage, what is very important is the political will of African heads of states and governments.
j'ai toujours dit dans des forats que nos chefs d'État sont certainement les champions en prenant des déclarations.
I've always said that our heads of states are champions for making declarations.
Mais la mise en œuvre devient des problèmes sérieux.
But implementing them is becoming a serious problem.
Parce que nos chefs d'État en Afrique préfèrent d'abord mettre beaucoup d'argent dans la sécurité.
Because our heads of state in Africa prefer to put a lot of money into security first.
Il y a eu la déclaration d'Abuja en 2001 où on a demandé à chacun de nos États de mettre au moins 15% de son budget dans la santé.
So there was a declaration in 2001, Abuja.
Yeah, Abuja Declaration.
Okay, thank
Abuja,
you.
yeah.
Where heads of states were asked to put at least 15% of their budget into health.
Mais sur les 55 pays d'Afrique, il n'y a que 2 pays d'Afrique seulement qui font ce que la déclaration d'Abuja a demandé.
But out of 55 African countries, only 2 have done what was asked of them in this declaration 2001.
Nous pensons que ce n'est pas du tout sérieux. Il nous faut des leaderships nationaux très forts, très engagés.
And we don't think this is serious. We need very strong national leadership to take us forward.
Je suis heureux de retrouver mon frère Michel Sidibé sur ces panels.
I'm very happy to find my brother, Mr.
Parce qu'à l'époque, le Parlement panafricain avait eu à beaucoup travailler avec lui déjà sur la question du financement de VIH et SIDA quand il était encore directeur exécutif de l'ONU-SIDA.
Because at the time the Pan-African Parliament worked a lot when he was involved at the UN level on the whole AIDS. So I'm not sure the exact terminology. C'est quoi, c'est le VIH, SIDA, the whole AIDS financing,
Yeah.
the UN. Oh, sorry, the WHO.
Maintenant qu'il est au gouvernement, la réalité du gouvernement est autre chose.
Now that he's at government level, it's a different thing.
Il va voir que son collègue ministre des Finances va préférer écouter plus les consignes que le chef de l'État va lui donner dans le domaine de la sécurité que de mettre de l'argent dans le domaine de la santé ou bien de l'éducation nationale.
He's going to see that now he's in the government level, that the head of state will be more interested in financing at a security level and not health or
Yes,
education.
I understand. It's because Big City Bear has come home, he cannot be treated like an average health minister.
Voilà, quand même,
Because, you know,
il peut pas
yes.
être traité comme le ministre
Yes.
de la Santé,
Ça se dit? Ça se va? Yes. Yes,
ça?
yes.
Vous dites?
Yes, yes, I'm saying, because it's Michel Sidibé, who has come from Geneva and so on, and ONU-SIDA,
il va retourner,
they have to listen to him. When he speaks on health, it carries weight.
il va parler de la santé.
Oui, je souhaite que l'ardeur
I hope
que
so.
Michel Sidibé en avait,
L'ardeur.
qu'il continue au niveau du gouvernement et qu'il donne l'exemple. Peut-être que ses collègues, les autres ministres de la Santé, vont lui emboîter les pas.
And then
Parce que ce ne sont pas les ressources qui nous manquent en Afrique,
Yes.
mais c'est seulement une question de gouvernance.
Yes.
He says we're not missing the resources in Africa, we're missing governance.
I need to ask another question. Thank you. Yes. But there has been some progress since the African Declaration on Immunization. So what can we learn from the progress that was made following that declaration on immunization to, I suppose, make it easier to make progress on universal health coverage? Because initially with immunization there was resistance, but you punched your way through. What can we learn from that to make implementation more effective on this, on universal health coverage?
Ce que nous pouvons faire plus en Afrique, il faudrait que cette affaire de couverture universelle sanitaire ne soit pas seulement l'affaire du ministre de la Santé.
What we need to do in Africa for this advances more is that it is not just a job for the health minister.
Il faudrait que ça soit l'affaire de tout le monde.
It's for everyone, it has to be everyone's job.
Et que nos communautés ne doivent plus être considérées comme des simples bénéficiaires, mais plutôt des acteurs également.
That people of the community should not be considered just those benefiting, but also as actors, acting.
Okay.
Et comme je le disais tout à l'heure, je pense que avec nos ressources, s'il y a une bonne volonté politique, s'il y a un engagement politique très fort, nous pouvons également avoir la couverture sanitaire sur le continent africain.
Right, so we have the resources, that's not lacking. Again, we have to go and have the political will and really move forward so that we really can achieve this universal health care.
C'est beau de faire des déclarations, c'est beau de prendre des initiatives, mais il faudrait la mise en œuvre. Et c'est pour cela que notre rôle, nous les parlementaires, nous ne devons pas baisser les bras, nous devons régulièrement interpeller nos gouvernements à nous rendre compte des engagements qu'ils prennent, même sur le plan international.
It's great to make all these declarations and all these speeches, but we, as members of the Pan-African Parliament, we really have to push our heads of state to really move forward.
Thank you very much indeed, Aurélien Simplice Zingas. Okay, and last but not least, we have Carmen Villa, who is Vice President, Social Business Innovation at Merck & Co. Thank you very much for being here. I'm just wondering what your starting point is then on this discussion, because I'm a Ghanaian by origin, and you're laughing at we Ghanaians, Michel. Yeah, oh God. Thank you. But there's always somebody, you know, among my relatives in Kumasi and Accra, who doesn't want to go for primary health care or to see the doctor. They're suffering because they worry about the costs. First of seeing the GP, the general practitioner, and then any drugs that may be prescribed. So people talk about the cost of drugs. How do you see this particular discussion, and how do you make yourselves an effective partner?
Well, first let me just say thank you for having me here today. All of the messages really resonate with me, and I think that the Access Challenge and One by One has been at the forefront of this kind of discussion and really posing some of these hard questions as you're posing to me.
Yes.
The issues around pricing and access are complex. We know this. And as we heard over here, that we know one government, no one entity can solve these problems on our own. And I think it's really important to think not only about cost, but trust in the system. If you are coming from a long way and you're sitting in a clinic waiting all day long, maybe with your babies or 2 or 3, and you've had to leave work, you've had to pay for transport, and you know you're there for 8 hours before you can even see a physician, and then maybe you need a referral to go someplace else, also a long way away, or you have to spend the night. These are things that make it very difficult to access any care, regardless of whether we're talking about medicines or vaccines or anything. And this is a similar situation in the States. We have people who show up for their primary care at the emergency room because they don't trust the provider, or because they had one bad experience, or they couldn't get the medicine they needed. So this is a universal problem, and I think we have to really come together and solve it, try to solve it together. I would say to the Honorable Mayor, I love what you are doing in Freetown in terms of bringing everybody together. And what I would encourage us to do is to continue that trend, including the sectors, the private sector, for example. You lead, you set the vision and the strategy. That's your job as an elected official. Then what is going to happen in terms of implementation, and how are you going to work together with the sectors to solve these problems? And then where in that ecosystem can the private sector help? We don't want to come in and say we know better, or blah, 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 whatever. We want to come in where we know we have strength, where we know we can support your agenda, and where it can make this health ecosystem and access to care even better.
Because I know you're focusing a lot, obviously, on supply chain management. That's right, isn't it?
We have been focused some through our Merck for Mothers program and supply chain, and I can speak more about that.
Yeah, because I mean, I always say at events like this, we can talk in the abstract and we can talk from up here, but stories are what you leave people with. So I want one or two stories which will show intra-governmental and positive partnerships, including with Merck and Co, that can make us think, so that's how you did it in Mali, or in Burkina, or in Rwanda.
Senegal.
Please. Senegal. Bon.
So through our Merck for Mothers program, which is an initiative to help the world reduce our horrible maternal mortality rates, we worked with Senegal, with the government, and on the supply chain for reproductive health. And really what we did was we brought in some private sector folks who knew how to do it and who worked within the public sector frame to help them achieve very, very low 2% stock-out rates. And that worked very well. And everybody's very proud of that story. Our challenge, as it is with the government, is the sustainability of that kind of work. Because what we're seeing is not only one ministry, but multiple ministries having to work together to create the tender, to create the financial security, to continue to sustain a program like that. And how we work with you beyond just that intervention, beyond just that, those 2 years of great successes, is really critical. And I think we need to start that discussion, as sometimes it's political, we need to start that discussion up front at the beginning of a partnership.
I'm not sure if everybody heard exactly what impact you had in that period. Can you explain what the situation was when you arrived, who you brought in, and what it was like when you finished the program?
Sure. So stock-out rates, meaning local facilities did not have access to family planning or reproductive health supplies and medicines at their local jurisdictions were very high. I can't quote the number off the top of my head.
That's all right. Yeah.
So we, our Merck for Mothers program, worked together by bringing in private sector experts who were experts in the last mile of supply chain, meaning not only getting it to the port or getting it to the country, but actually then getting it to the district level, getting it throughout the country where it needs to go. They worked within the public sector frame to really help make improvements. Now, they used some digital tools, but it reduced their stock-out rates, meaning people had drugs regularly available down to less than 2%.
Right.
This is phenomenal, thinking about the trust I was talking about. As a woman, you go to a facility and you can't get the medications you need, or you can't get the service you need, but now you can. And for 2 years, we saw this success. Now, in talking about the transfer and the responsibility, the sustainability of this project, we've come into a little bit of hiccups in terms of how it can be sustained.
Right.
They have the expertise in country. There are some challenges between government entities in terms of contracting and getting that financing flowing and so forth. So what is it that we can do there to help ensure that these kind of important systems can be sustained much longer? And I think we have to continue to have that discussion. As we were hearing over here, what is the political commitment?
Yes.
But also the governance, taking it to the next level to sustain those kinds of systems.
All right, so that's a nice question, which perhaps we can answer here on the panel, because Carmen is stumped. She thinks, okay, we did well, but we need to sustain this. What do we need to do next? Michel Sidibé, can you help Carmen? Carmen, can you help Michel Sidibé?
Thank you very much. I was listening very carefully. I think the bottom line is issues of ownership. When I'm sitting in the position where I am today, and I'm seeing how we are fragmented, you will never be able to go to what she was describing, going to sustainability and going to scale, making sure that you can reach people with services. If you're coming, each of you, from different corners with different services. For example, in Mali, I have almost 96 NGOs, non-governmental organizations coming, that is from abroad, and 96 from national, plus UN, plus others. So the first thing is the ownership, is to make sure that we are capable to really demonstrate to our partners that we have a vision, we are clear on what we want to achieve, and we want you to support us and to accompany us.
So they have to fit in with your agenda.
Fit in that priority.
Okay.
If that is not happening, it will be always a feel-good project. So we'll have some result here, some result here, but nothing will be really sustainable for people. That is the first thing I think is very important. The second, to be honest, by listening, we launched already, you remember, Bamako initiative years back. And we were really all enthusiastic to go for Bamako initiative, which is similar in some way to capacitate community, to go to primary health care, to make sure that really we can go to scale with result for people. But what was the major challenge we face with that one, and why we should avoid the same mistake today? I think first, we didn't realize that it's very important for us to look at the human capacity we have. If you're in Sierra Leone with one doctor for 45,000 people, one doctor for 45,000 people, and whatever she can try to do, it will be very difficult. You have a major inequity issues, which is need to be addressed, which need to be addressed quickly. And it cannot be addressed by just training people from Harvard. You need to go to community health workers. Yeah. You need to really transfer competencies down there. You need to reinforce the interface between service provider and community. That is the second element, fabric, I want to just add to this discussion. Mm-hmm. The third one for me is that you need to really be able to go beyond just the rhetoric around making sure that poor people can access to services. Mm-hmm. Today in my country, 50% of expenditure are out of pocket, mm-hmm. paid by those poor people who cannot afford, who cannot come. So they are pushed to go into extreme poverty, abandoning, selling their belonging, their land and others, and because they cannot afford to really have access to even a simple primary health care. Which means what? We need a different partnership also when you have 25% of health burden in our continent. I'm talking about now our continent. And you produce only 3% of the medicine. That is not sustainable. Mm-hmm. We need a different partnership with you, with others, to start thinking that this continent can be able also to produce medicine, which will be certainly available, mm-hmm. which could really respond to one of the challenges of this universal health coverage, because you can have the best gun with you if you don't have any weapon inside.
Okay, you mentioned a different partnership. We've got the Global Financing Facility here. How would you like your partnership with Monique Vleder and her people to change?
I think for me, we were together in Norway and we were advocating to make sure that first we convince people that investing in really in health is not a cost, that they should understand that is about return for the society, is a transformative return. And that's what we have been trying to do. We continue to do that. We need global solidarity. You cannot think today that only one country alone can be able to pay for universal
I'm going to stop you there.
So that is very important.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, can I just, I do want to reply to your first comment, which I loved in terms of the 96 NGOs and the multiple partners coming. I mean, I've lived in 2 African countries, and I know what that's like. And what I really want to challenge us to do is to help organize that in a way that speaks to your leadership and your vision and your strategy, because you can set that tone. And I'm looking at Dr. Agnes if she sees me up here, but you know, in Rwanda, she was very successful at doing that, not only through our vaccination partnership that we had with her, but also with some of the public programs like PEPFAR, basically demanding that they do business in a different way. And I think that it behooves leaders to do that. You set the tone, and I think that's really, and then you tell us, where are the gaps and how can we work with you?
And Henry, can I just come in just on top of, to just reinforce what Carmen has just said, because with Transform Freetown, that's precisely what we did. And I didn't mention private, but it wasn't because they weren't there. It was public, private, social actors. Everyone was at the table. And we did it, I came into office in May. By August, we first did it with all the government players. So I had the privilege, because he could have said no, but you know, I pitched the idea to the president. He called a cabinet meeting, cabinet ministers, deputy ministers. I presented the Transform agenda. I put the government names against health and EPA against environment. That sense of buy-in, because everyone needs to be there. Next port of call was all the development partners, from World Bank to EU to the Chinese embassy. 40 development partners in my office. This is Transform Freetown. You're here or you're not in Freetown. And then we did it with 100 NGOs. Every NGO, we went through the same thing. So now Transform Freetown is owned by the city. Everybody knows what our targets are, and if you're working in Freetown, you are working to those targets. And the stranglers, I just turn my face.
It helps you refocus those finances as well. It helps you refocus those finances when we're talking about out-of-patient costs.
Okay.
Those can be
Very
redirected.
good. The energy is rising. Aurélien.
Oui, j'ai écouté.
Yes, comme toujours, Sidibé, comme toujours.
J'ai écouté les collègues parler de la contribution des privés. Mais il s'agit de quel privé?
So he's saying, yes, we're talking about contribution on the private level, but
On ne
what
peut,
type of private
on ne
contribution
peut
are we
pas
talking
prendre
about?
des petits commerçants et dire que ce sont des privés.
We can't take little businesses and say that this is the private sector.
En Occident, par exemple, quand on dit des fondations privées, on nous cite des noms de Bill Gates qui contribuent.
So we talk sometimes about, ça, vous avez dit au niveau de où?
Je disais qu'en Occident, par exemple,
right.
ici,
In the West,
West,
when
yeah.
we're talking about here in the West,
Yeah, yeah.
when we talk about private contributors, we talk about Bill Gates.
or sur le continent africain, il y a des multimilliardaires en dollars privés, mais qui ne contribuent pas, par exemple.
In Africa, we have multinationals, but they don't contribute. C'est ce que vous dites, qu'ils ne contribuent pas.
Oui, qui ne
They
contribuent
don't
pas.
contribute.
Et donc, pour que nous arrivions, moi, j'ai des doutes que d'ici 2030, que beaucoup de pays africains aient la couverture santé universelle.
This is why I'm doubtful, even though we have this target of 2030, that African countries will be able to achieve
Parce que
universal health
2030, c'est dans 11 ans seulement.
It's only in 11 years.
Mais la volonté, je reviens encore sur la question de volonté politique.
I'm coming back to
L'exemple
political will.
du Rwanda qui vient d'être cité, parce que le président Kagame a une volonté politique. Aujourd'hui, Kigali, je dirais même que c'est la capitale la plus propre de l'Afrique.
He's saying that Rwanda, the example there, is because the president had the political
Même-
will, and today he's saying
même
it
les
is
pays-
probably the cleanest country in Africa.
Même les pays les plus propres du monde, parce que tout à l'heure, ici à New York, en marchant pour venir ici, j'ai failli tomber, j'ai mis mon pied, ah oui, dans un sachet qui a failli me faire renverser.
On our way walking here, he said
Or à Kigali, on ne peut pas voir ça.
he put his foot in a garbage bag and he almost tripped.
Alors donc, pour moi, le jour où nos dirigeants comprendront que nous devons mieux gérer nos ressources, que ce soit les ressources humaines, que ce soit les ressources financières, nous allons vite avoir la couverture santé universelle.
Merci.
This is where he's saying again that once our leaders recognize we have the resources, but once they realize the best way to use them, then we will be able to.
Thank you very much
universal health
indeed.
coverage.
Monique, I'm going to have a quick supplementary with you, and then
Yeah.
I'm going to ask people to comment.
Great, and this is such a great discussion. And when I look across the 36 countries that we're currently engaging in, really the country leadership is the absolute most important criteria for success, right? And after that, it's a long way to the
Yeah.
next criteria, right? So, and I think we can see that here. But I wanted to make two more points. One is that it's been really interesting to see how much we can do by just looking at using current resources better, right? And I just wanted to make that point because there's always so much emphasis on, there needs to be more financing. And yes, in many places there needs to be more financing. Then also the financing needs to be better targeted to those in need. But we do have opportunities to use resources better. And maybe finally that those governments that have chosen to be transparent around the link between their financing and the results that they are creating are doing the best.
Yeah.
And because it builds confidence and it gives openness around where the challenges are and how modifications can be made. And to me, that is really part and instrumental of good leadership, that we follow that.
Excellent, Monique. Thank
Henry,
you
can I
very
butt in,
much.
please?
Really
Just one,
quick,
yeah,
I
really
wanna
quick
get
one.
some questions.
Just because the point you made was those national governments, and I just want to say again, primary health care in my country is devolved to the cities.
Yeah.
It's devolved to the local governments, and yet so often the financing structures do not engage with local governments. So here you have an opportunity for transparent, visionary leadership all over, not just in Freetown, in many cities. We need a reconsideration of how the financing flows.
So, Monique and Carmen, you've been told, go to the city, not just to State House or to the ministry.
So
City.
we finance a lot on decentralized level in Kenya and other places, and I fully agree with you. It's
Bon, bravo, merci. Aye. Okay, so, we've only got a few minutes, so I'd like to get a couple of questions, very brief comments. Okay, man right in front. Can we get a microphone to the gentleman here? From the Hunger Project, I think.
That's right.
John, yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have a question for Her Excellency the Mayor.
Yes.
And it's on this last point. So
Yeah.
in 2014, the African Union adopted a charter for decentralization. And there was a wide agreement around a norm of 20% of public resources to the communities where it can be used best. As far as I know, Kenya is the only country that has done that. What could we do to present this argument that communities, if they have a bit of resources, can actually provide that kind of integrated community-led solutions? How can we mobilize the political will to get devolution to happen in Africa?
All right, can you pass the microphone to the gentleman behind you? Don't ask yet. Respond quickly. Yeah. Yes.
You can put pressure. So in our case in Sierra Leone, the current government has made it a priority, but there's a big gap between priorities and policies and then implementation. So it's much less. I think it's something like 3% to local government. But we're now in 23rd of September. So far this year, we've received 20% of our allocation for the year.
Good pressure. Gentleman there, yes.
All right, good day. This is for the entire panel. So I just wanted to find out what their views are with regards to universal healthcare for all, because we talk about this, but we also don't talk about the fact that we still have colonial laws in Africa that still prevent certain communities from living their lives. So there's still issues around stigma.
Yes, be
judgment.
explicit so we know exactly
for example,
what you mean.
key populations in Africa, so your sex workers, your men who have sex with men,
Yes.
are still communities that are still oppressed in some African countries.
Yes.
So how are we going to achieve universal health coverage if certain communities aren't involved in the conversation? Because, for example, in South Africa, where I live, there's a shortage of hormones for trans individuals.
Yes.
So I don't think also by 2030 we'll get to that point if
Yes.
we don't also look into our colonial laws.
Very good. It's a really good question. I was at the Fast Track Cities event in London, which was looking at just that question. Yes, I think Aurelian must. Okay, this gentleman was saying, how do we get to universal health coverage across Africa when there are so many communities that are... Ah, en français?
Parlez-moi en français.
Ok, je vais parler en français.
Il va essayer.
Comment?
Oui, vas-y.
Ok, je vais essayer, mais je ne suis pas super bien en français. Mais bon, comment est-ce qu'on va achever Universal Healthcare, UHC, s'il y a des communautés en Afrique qui sont marginalisées, comme les hommes qui vont sexe avec les hommes, par exemple les gens avec le sida, les transsexuels. Alors, s'il y a des gens marginalisés, comment leur donner la santé, la bonne santé, les médicaments?
Non, quand...
Ça se choisit pas?
Bon, je vais...
Bien, je sais pas. C'était très bien. Ah, merci.
Voilà,
très bien.
je vais essayer. Quand le jeune frère parle de la marginalisation d'une partie de la communauté, je ne comprends pas. Et il parle de la loi coloniale. On ne peut pas parler de la loi coloniale dans le domaine de la santé quand même.
So we can't talk about, referring to you,
Moi, je vais expliquer ça.
that
OK.
You can't talk about,
Yes.
if you're talking about people being marginalized, you can't talk about colonial laws.
Okay, I think I know what you mean. So, for example, in countries like Zimbabwe... No, but I said for example, because it was our most extreme example from the late Mugabe. Okay. But in Kenya, in Uganda, in Ghana, in Nigeria, so many, okay. When the British were there, they made homosexuality a crime in the penal code because... Yes.
They introduced sodomies.
Anti-sodomy laws,
Yes.
as it was called. But even though the African countries have got their independence from the old British regime and the French and other regimes, they have kept these laws which make life very difficult for people in health and so many other areas of their lives. That's what you mean. Voilà, ça se dit, ça se traduit.
Non, je ne pense pas que en gardant ces positions, la vie soit rendue très difficile à un certain nombre de communautés. L'Afrique a ses us, l'Afrique a ses coutumes. On ne peut pas vouloir le beurre et le contraire. Parler de la santé, dire que nous voulons de la santé. Et on accepte à ce qu'on se fasse n'importe quoi. Se faire sodomiser. Non, ce n'est pas possible.
Okay.
Excusez-moi.
I can see this discussion is going to take off in a really powerful way. And I so wish we had an extra half hour. I think we need an extra half hour. But we don't have it. Madam Ruth, yes, please. Last one, okay.
Okay, this is another debate.
Yes.
But sex with attraction to somebody from the same sex, it's not something important. It's something that exists everywhere. And if we start reading the literature, you will find that there are scientific reasons to that. But this is another debate.
Yeah.
I just want to say, great, everything what you said, the panel is great. Putting those ladies and gentlemen together is important. But I just want to give my question to a parliamentarian that is representing me. I'm an African lady. And I just want to tell you, sir, and I'll say it in French after, that if ministers, mayors, NGOs from outside and from inside Africa have their responsibility to make things happen for community, where are our parliaments?
Yes.
You are voting. You are making the laws. You are there to watch our president. We have only 54 presidents, 55. But we have between 2,000 and 3,000 parliamentarians. Wake them up.
Okay.
Ce que je vais vous dire, et je vais le traduire moi-même, tous ces gens-là, vous tous, vous êtes un panel fantastique. Mais vous cachez derrière les présidents pour ne pas faire votre devoir. Le Parlement est là pour passer des lois. C'est vous qui les passez. Regardez ce que nos présidents font. C'est vous qui le faites. Et vous êtes des politiciens, non de Dieu. Il faut pas me... Don't talk about politics.
Il faut atterrisser maintenant.
Je suis
30
heureux.
secondes, 30 secondes.
Oui, je suis heureux que les parlementaires soient interpellés. Je disais tout à l'heure que nous, les parlementaires, nous avons un rôle aussi important à jouer. Parce que parlant des populations, c'est parler de nos électeurs également. Nous votons la loi. Par exemple, la loi de finances. C'est la période de maintenant. Je suis content, hein, c'est la période de maintenant en octobre. Et quand la loi de finances arrive, l'arbitrage est fait déjà au niveau de l'exécutif. Quand ça arrive à l'Assemblée nationale, on ne peut pas modifier. Quand on veut faire augmenter, par exemple, la ligne qui concerne la santé, on nous demande de trouver les ressources ailleurs.
Il faut arrêter maintenant. Je suis vraiment désolé, il faut arrêter.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Mais
il faut traduire.
Avec 30 secondes et moi,
Et fini.
Yeah.
Voilà.
Sorry, because they're so involved, the two of them.
Yes.
But essentially saying that, yes, we are trying to play a role, but for example, when there's a law on financing for us to vote on, it's already there, and we don't have a lot of leverage. That's why we're saying more or less that we need our presidents, our heads of states to do more, in a nutshell.
Wow, there is so much ending here. I've got to give Michel Sidibé 15 seconds.
No,
Yes.
even 10 seconds.
Okay.
I want just to say, without also putting innovation at the center of what we'll do in the next 15 years, it will be very difficult to go for universal health coverage.
Yes.
Innovation is important. And innovation will happen in community level, will happen with governance, changing the governance, but will happen also with private sector. And the last one, I think we need to move from a disease approach to building a healthy society. It's impossible for me.
Yes. It's a great place at which to end. So please put your hands together for Michel Sidibé.